Every 5 years, millions of Kenyan voters step into the ballot booth with the sense they are handing a blank check to a rotating cast of elites. Historically, Kenyan political alliances function as instruments of ethnic mobilization, sweeping voters into rigid demographic blocks defined by geography, overriding economic interests. These blocks often operate behind a legal facade. To satisfy Article 91 of the Constitution and unlock state funding, regional leaders stitch together temporary alliances that meet the national character requirement on paper while preserving their local bases. Public manifestos within this system are frequently dismissed as matatu music, performative noise designed to distract the electorate rather than provide a binding roadmap for governance. This public perception causes citizens to abandon the mechanics of structural accountability. Political theater becomes the accepted reality, and the tracking of specific policy deliverables falls away. Breaking this cycle requires moving past cynicism. It requires an examination of the underlying statutory architecture that dictates how political power is actually shared and exercised. The Political Parties Act of 2011 provides the primary legal structure for this examination. It acts as the uncompromising rulebook for the political elite. While rally speeches dominate public attention, the formal power dynamics of the state are locked inside documents regulated by the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, or the ORPP. The ORPP is mandated to ensure all registered entities adhere to democratic principles, effectively treating political parties as regulated corporate bodies with specific statutory obligations. This regulatory oversight extends to the legislative body that commands the state's budget and confirms the appointments that lead the executive branch. The non-binding rhetoric of a campaign contrasts with the legally binding contracts deposited with the ORPP. These formal agreements dictate the actual terms of power sharing and the allocation of national resources. Civic leverage is found by looking past the campaign speech and demanding access to these registered contracts. Kenyan law establishes 2 distinct mechanisms for parties to consolidate power: mergers and coalitions. A merger occurs when 2 or more parties combine into a single entity. This process results in the dissolution of the original parties. All assets, liabilities, and entitlements to the political party's fund transfer permanently to the newly formed organization. A coalition is an alliance of independent parties formed to pursue a common goal, governed by a specific written agreement. Parties in a coalition retain their individual corporate identities and legal status. They operate as autonomous entities linked by a binding joint venture. The law requires these unions to be formalized. Parties must sign and deposit a memorandum of understanding with the registrar, replacing private agreements with a public record to discourage post-election betrayals. These legal distinctions reveal whether an alliance represents a permanent institutional change or a temporary arrangement for electoral gain. The ORPP enforces a strict legal timeline that limits the strategic flexibility of political leaders. This is the tactical clock. Section 10 of the Political Parties Act details the requirements for these alliances. The statute requires specific timelines for filing these agreements. Under the 120-day rule, any coalition agreement intended for a general election must be legally filed and locked 4 months before citizens vote. This rule is designed to bring elite negotiations into the public record. It provides the electorate a window to scrutinize power-sharing terms before they reach the ballot box. For coalitions formed after an election, the 21-day rule requires parties to file their terms of governance and cooperation within 3 weeks of signing the contract. The coalition agreement, restricted by these deadlines, serves as the actual contract governing the country, while the campaign manifesto remains a secondary document. When a coalition assumes executive power, the campaign manifesto begins a formal transition into state policy. This transition is managed through the Fourth Medium-Term Plan, or MTP4. This is the bureaucratic mechanism that translates political priorities into macroeconomic strategy. The National Treasury integrates the winning platform into the long-term goals of Kenya Vision 2030. This integration converts political rhetoric into binding public financial management and departmental strategic plans. The Bottom-Up Economic Transformation Agenda, or BETA, provides a contemporary case study of this statutory integration. The BETA model directs capital and state interventions towards sectors at the bottom of the pyramid. resources are deployed to smallholder agriculture and informal micro-enterprises to drive national growth. When a manifesto successfully transitions into an MTP, it becomes a legally auditable government obligation. Real citizen leverage is achieved by comparing the administration's delivery scorecard directly against the objectives registered in MTP4. This chart tracks the national inflation rate, a key metric in the administration's macroeconomic mandate. Inflation dropped from a peak of 9.6% in late 2022 to a stabilized 4.3% by late 2025. Progress can also be measured in the affordable housing pillar. The baseline of 8,872 units in 2022 grew to over 260,000 units launched or under construction by 2025. This housing expansion created over 640,000 jobs within the construction and supply chain sectors. In agriculture, a shift toward production-focused policies, such as subsidized fertilizer, directly affected basic commodity prices. The retail price of maize flour dropped from 250 to 165 shillings. The Financial Inclusion Fund, or Hustler Fund, disbursed 82 billion shillings in credit to 26 million borrowers, targeting the informal sector directly. These data points are the measurable results of executing a registered statutory blueprint. When the electorate tracks macroeconomic data against registered legal timelines, the space for accountability grows. This structural oversight anchors political competition in institutionalized, measurable results, providing a framework for citizens to hold the state to its written promises.